past 30 years, one question has repeatedly haunted me. We've worked hard to communicate the gospel to as many people as possible. We've seen millions of Americans choose to follow Jesus. So why has our culture gotten worse, not better? Now, I had an idea what the answer might be, but I wasn't certain. So the other day, I listed out what I thought the three most likely answers might be. After testing them, I realized it wasn't any of them. Then it dawned on me, I had missed one, a far more important one. At that point, I thought I'd found the answer. But then again, as I tested it, I found my answer lacking. But out of that testing emerged the answer I'd been searching for, and I began crying out of deep, deep sadness. That's not like me. I'm an optimist, even when circumstances are horribly bleak. But God had finally peeled back all the layers for me and opened my eyes. And so I cried. Kathy was sitting on the couch next to me. She asked me to tell her what had just happened, but I couldn't even talk. I simply handed her my notes that I'd been jotting down. She was silent for a long time. Folks, I've identified the core problem, and it grieves my very soul. But what's worse is I know it grieves the heart of God even more. If God as a spirit can weep, then he's weeping. He's sobbing. We've broken his heart. I've broken his heart. For the next few minutes, I'm going to take you with me through my thought journey, and then I'm going to talk about what God made very plain. I'm going to be more vulnerable than I've ever been before in public. Now, please understand, I've always been an extremely private person. I grew up in a family where I could not talk about half the things I heard around the dinner table. In addition, I didn't ever want to do anything or say anything that might reflect poorly on my dad. And so I learned to deflect with such skill and warmth that most people never had a clue that I was managing them. And those skills blossomed into an exquisite art form during my stint in politics. But today, those walls are coming down out of the necessity of the moment in history in which we find ourselves. This is Brad Bright. Welcome to the God is the Issue podcast, where I show God is the issue in every issue. Why? Because we can trace all our human problems to our view of God. If you find this podcast helpful, please remember to like and subscribe. And when subscribing, don't forget to click on the bell so you'll be notified whenever I post a new podcast. The clear and widespread proclamation of the gospel consistently births social change. It's the engine of social transformation, not the means, the engine. It's what enables followers of Jesus to create and sustain movements of significant social change. I could give you example after example after example from the pages of history, but there's not time today. But that presents a huge paradox for me. We've faithfully communicated the gospel in America for decades, and yet America has gotten worse in so many ways, not better. Why? Well, the first three possible answers which I explored were: first, we haven't effectively communicated the gospel to everyone. As individual followers of Jesus, most of us are too afraid to talk with our neighbors about Jesus. We're afraid of our own shadows. Many of us still believe that's the pastor's job anyway, and most of us don't have a clue how to help a new believer grow in their faith. Second, the culture can't hear us because we don't know how to speak the culture's language. We speak churchy language. We have our own subculture. But many of those who do learn to speak the culture's language end up bending and compromising the message of the gospel in order to not scare away the fish. They end up compromising truth in their effort to communicate God's love. And third, America is simply bad soil. Jesus spoke of 4 kinds of soil: good soil and 3 kinds of bad soil. We have a lot of bad soil in America. But no soil is so bad that the Spirit of God can't transform it into good soil. I've personally seen God transform hard soil into good soil. But folks, although there's truth in all 3 of those answers, what I realized is that all 3 of them are only symptoms of a much deeper problem. So I asked, what is the underlying problem? I concluded that we aren't praying enough, because only God can convert a person's heart. We aren't praying for a revival like we should. We aren't praying for our campuses. We aren't praying for our neighbors. We aren't praying for our communities. We aren't praying for our nation. But then I realized even that was only a symptom of a much, much deeper problem. And that's when I started crying. I couldn't speak. In that moment, the truth engulfed my puny little brain. Kathy and I and her mom attended the Good Friday service at our church a couple weeks ago. Rows and rows of college students from CU sat in front of us. After the service was over, I went down to talk with some of the students. I was just curious. I singled out two of the guys, walked up to them, introduced myself, and then asked them this question. Why are you here tonight? One of the guys, Gabe, he didn't hesitate. Because I love Jesus. Folks, I choked up. I couldn't help it. I felt like a fool tearing up in front of these two young men I just met. The Gospels often say that Jesus went out even before it was light to spend time in prayer. I always assumed he spent time in prayer so he'd have the strength to do the things his Father had asked him to do. But do you know what I realized the other night when God showed me the real reason American culture has continued to self-destruct? Jesus didn't get up before dawn to pray in order to have the strength to do what his Father had asked him to do. He went alone to pray because he loved his Father more than life itself. He just wanted to spend time alone with his daddy, with his Abba, because he loved him so much. And then I looked in the mirror. Let me tell you what I saw. I saw a person who was eternally grateful to Jesus from the bottom of his heart. I saw a person with a deep and powerful respect for God. I saw a person who loves Jesus because he first loved me. But now let me tell you what I didn't see. And this is the part that made me cry. I didn't see a person who loves God with all his heart, all his soul, all his strength, and all his mind. And so I cried. I couldn't help it. I once knew a man who loved Jesus with all his heart, all his soul, all his strength, and all his mind. His name was Bill Bright. Growing up, I called him Daddy. He loved Jesus. In his book, Blue Like Jazz, Donald Miller told the story about my dad. Let me read it to you. I think it sums up my dad perfectly. A guy I know named Alan went around the country asking ministry leaders questions. He went to successful churches and asked the pastors what they were doing, why what they were doing was working. It sounded very boring, except for one visit he made to a man named Bill Bright, the president of a big ministry. Alan said he was a big man, full of life, who listened without shifting his eyes. Alan asked a few questions. I don't know what they were, but as a final question, he asked Dr. Bright what Jesus meant to him. Alan said Dr. Bright could not answer the question. He said Dr. Bright just started to cry. He sat there in his big chair behind his big desk and wept. When Alan told that story, I wondered what it was like to love Jesus that way. I wondered, quite honestly, if this Bill Bright guy was just nuts or if he really knew Jesus in a personal way so well that he would cry at the very mention of his name. I knew then that I would like to know Jesus like that, with my heart, not just my head. Folks, early on in my cancer journey 3.5 years ago, God whispered to me, in that small, still voice, Brad, I know the desire of your heart is to become conformed to the image of my Son. And I want you to know I'm going to get you there. I thought that meant he was going to make me a better person, a more consistent person, a person who sins less, a holier person in the day-to-day processes of life. Maybe those things will come true. I don't know. But now I finally realize what God really meant. He's going to teach me to love like Jesus loved. Like Jesus loved his Father. Like Jesus loved his disciples. Like Jesus loved the people he came to die for. That's what it means to become conformed to the image of Christ, to love like Jesus loved, to love God with all my heart, all my soul, all my strength, and all my mind. That's who Jesus was. Jesus loved his Father more than his own life. He freely gave up his life for me, simply because his Father asked him to do it. Not out of duty, not out of respect, but out of a deep, deep love for his Father. That's what it means to be conformed to the image of Christ. That's how Bill Bright loved God. That's how the Apostle Paul loved God. That's even how the Virgin Mary loved God. Folks, the early Christians didn't radically change Roman culture by trying to change the culture. They changed the culture by loving Jesus more than life itself. The love of God will change American culture if and when the love of God consumes us. If God is stirring your heart as he is mine, will you join with me in asking God to inflame our hearts with an all-consuming love for him? You see, a small band of totally committed people can change the course of history. Not a band committed to evangelism or discipleship or prayer, though those are all critical, but a band committed to loving God with all our heart, all our soul, all our strength, and all our mind. If my words have resonated with your heart today, please let me know, either in the comments section or by sending a note via the contact form at brightmedia.org. I'm not exactly sure what it would look like, but I would love to do this together with you and then see what God does. God is the issue in every issue. I hope you found this podcast helpful. If you did, please remember to share it. This is Brad Bright. Thanks for joining me today. God bless.